The roar of the airplane engines echoed across the dimly lit military base as the soldiers stepped off, one by one. Among them was Jake Carter, a young Marine, his uniform slightly worn, his eyes scanning the darkened runway as he adjusted the duffel bag on his shoulder. He took a deep breath, inhaling the cool night air after spending 11 months deployed in Kuwait. It felt unreal. The smell of home, the distant hum of the city, the solid ground beneath his boots. But even though he was back, he wasn't sure if he still had a home to return to. The camera focuses on his phone. The screen glows against the darkness, displaying the last photo he received from Emily, his girlfriend. She's smiling brightly, her blonde hair pulled into a high ponytail, wearing her college cheerleading uniform. But something about the image unsettles him. She hasn't replied to his messages in weeks. Jake scrolls through their last conversation. 3 months ago, Jake, I miss you. Can't wait to see you again. Emily, seen 2 months ago. Jake, Emily, everything okay? Emily, seen 1 month ago. Jake, I'll be home soon. Hope you're still waiting for me. No response. Jake grips his phone tightly. His stomach knots. Something feels wrong. He tries to push the thoughts away. Maybe she was just busy. Maybe it was all in his head. But deep down, he knows something has changed. Taking a final breath, Jake starts walking toward the exit. He's about to find out the truth, and nothing could have prepared him for what was coming. The bus rumbled down the highway, the city lights flickering in the distance. Jake sat near the window, staring at his phone, his thumb hovering over Emily's chat. He wanted to believe there was a good reason for her silence, but the pit in his stomach told him otherwise. With a deep breath, he opened Instagram. He searched for her profile. The latest post was from 2 weeks ago. Emily, smiling with friends from college, and standing beside her, with his arm casually draped over her shoulders, was Ryan. Jake's heart dropped. Ryan, the star quarterback of her university's football team. Jake swallowed hard, his eyes flicking to the comments. You two are perfect together. So happy for you. Finally. His pulse quickened. Finally. What the hell did that mean? Jake clenched his fists, his breathing uneven. The bus slowed as it approached his stop. He slid his phone into his pocket, his jaw tightening. Maybe it was just a misunderstanding. Maybe. But the fear had already settled deep inside him. And now there was only one way to find out the truth. He was going to see her. And nothing would ever be the same again. Jake stood outside Emily's house, his breath visible in the cold night air. His heart pounded as he looked up at her window. It was dark. He hesitated for a moment before pulling out his phone. He could send a message right now, force a response. But no, he needed to see her face. Before he could put his phone away, a notification appeared. New message from Emily. His heart stopped. He tapped the screen, reading the words carefully. Emily, Jake, we need to talk. That was it. No excitement. No, I missed you. Just those words. A cold feeling crept up his spine. She knew he was back, and she had something to tell him. Jake walked to the side of the house, stepping onto the small ledge by her window, just like old times. He knocked lightly. For a few seconds, nothing. Then, a light turned on. The curtain shifted. And when Emily appeared, Jake instantly knew something was wrong. Terribly wrong. Emily froze. For a long second, she just stood there, gripping the curtain. Her eyes locked on Jake as if she had seen a ghost. Jake's heart pounded in his chest. Why wasn't she smiling? Why wasn't she running to open the window, throwing her arms around him like she always used to? Emily! He called out softly. She blinked, snapping out of whatever trance she was in, and slowly unlatched the window. The cold air rushed into the room. Jake. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Her brown eyes shimmered, not with joy, but with something else. Guilt. Fear. A knot tightened in Jake's stomach. Why didn't you answer me? His voice was low but firm. I sent messages. I tried calling. What happened? Emily glanced over her shoulder, biting her lip. Jake, it's complicated. His jaw tightened. Complicated how? She looked back at him, eyes pleading, like she was begging him to just let it go. We need to talk, but not here, not now. A loud noise suddenly echoed from inside the house. The sound of a door opening. Footsteps. Emily's eyes widened in panic. "You have to go," she whispered urgently. Jake's blood turned to ice. "Who's here, Emily?" Her hands trembled as she reached for the window. "Just meet me tomorrow. The park. 10 o'clock." The curtain snapped shut. Jake stood there, his breath heavy, his fists clenched. His mind screamed for answers. Something was wrong. Very wrong. And he wasn't walking away without the truth. The cold morning air stung Jake's face as he sat on a bench in the park. His hands were clasped together, elbows resting on his knees, his mind racing. Who was in Emily's house last night? Why was she so afraid to talk to him there? And most importantly, was he about to hear something that would break him? His stomach twisted as he checked the time, 9:58 a.m. Then he saw her. Emily walked toward him slowly, her blonde hair pulled into a messy bun, her oversized sweatshirt making her look smaller than usual. But what really struck him was her face. She looked tired, not the bright, energetic girl he left behind, and that terrified him. She stopped in front of him, hesitating before sitting down on the bench. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, Emily took a deep breath. "Why didn't you tell me you were coming back?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake frowned. "I wanted to surprise you." He studied her expression. "But I guess I'm the one surprised." Emily dropped her gaze to her hands, twisting her fingers nervously. "Jake, She hesitated. "Things changed." His heart stopped. "Changed how?" She swallowed hard, her eyes filling with unshed tears. Jake felt the ground beneath him begin to crack. "I tried to tell you. I tried to write so many times, but I just couldn't." Jake's jaw clenched. "Tell me what?" She finally looked at him, and then she said the words that shattered him. "Jake, I'm with someone else." The world went silent. The distant chatter of the park, the rustling of leaves in the wind, the sound of his own heartbeat, everything faded. The only thing he could hear was the sound of his heart breaking. Jake felt like the world had just collapsed beneath him. "You're with someone else?" His voice came out hoarse, barely a whisper. Emily didn't meet his eyes. "I never wanted to hurt you, Jake." He clenched his fists, his breathing uneven. His worst nightmare was happening right in front of him. "How long?" he finally asked. Emily hesitated, then closed her eyes for a moment, as if bracing herself. 4 months. 4 months. Jake let out a slow breath, trying to process it. For 4 months, while he was counting the days to come home, while he was pushing through the loneliness, the sleepless nights, the fear of war. Emily had already moved on. His voice was sharper now. "Who is it?" Emily squeezed her hands together, avoiding his stare. "Jake, it doesn't matter." "It matters to me." His voice turned cold. "Tell me." She hesitated, and then she said his name. "Ryan." Jake's whole body went rigid. Ryan, the college football star. The guy who always flirted with Emily, even when she was with Jake. The same Ryan who was in that Instagram photo, the one with his arm wrapped around her. Jake felt his blood boil. He stood up abruptly, his fists clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Emily's eyes widened. "Jake, wait!" He took a step back, his heart pounding. "I can't do this." Emily got up too, reaching for him. "Please, just listen." Jake yanked his arm away. "I listened, Emily." His voice cracked, full of anger and pain. "And I heard enough." He turned his back on her. This conversation was over. Emily took a shaky step forward. "Jake!" But he didn't stop. For the first time in almost a year, he wasn't walking toward Emily. He was walking away from her. And this time, He wasn't coming back. Jake walked with no destination, his mind racing, his chest tight with anger and betrayal. Ryan, of all people, Ryan. The guy who never respected boundaries, the guy who was always a little too close to Emily, the guy Jake never trusted. And Emily chose him. Jake's fists clenched as he pulled out his phone and typed a quick message to his best friend. Jake, where are you? Matt, at the gym with the guys. You okay? Jake, be there in 10. College gym, 10:45 a.m. Jake pushed open the doors to the gym, his eyes scanning the court. Basketballs bounced, sneakers squeaked against the polished floor. Voices shouted plays, and then he saw him. Ryan, laughing, joking with teammates, like nothing had happened, like he hadn't just destroyed Jake's world. Jake walked straight toward him, his heartbeat pounding in his ears. Ryan turned, and his smile disappeared the second he saw Jake. The gym fell into silence. Teammates and students watching from the bleachers stopped talking. They could all feel the tension. Jake. Ryan's voice was cautious. Jake stopped just inches away from him, his fists clenching and unclenching at his sides. We need to talk, Ryan sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Look, man, I didn't plan for this to happen. Jake laughed bitterly. You didn't plan, really? His voice was low, controlled, but dangerous. Ryan shifted uncomfortably. I swear, I never wanted to hurt you, dude. But you did. Jake's jaw tightened. So tell me, how long did you wait before making a move? A week? A month? Ryan exhaled sharply, then finally looked him in the eye. Jake, I love her. Something inside Jake snapped. He lunged. Before anyone could react, Jake grabbed Ryan by the shirt, shoving him backward. Gasps filled the gym. Jake, stop! A familiar voice called. Jake turned and saw Emily running toward them. His grip on Ryan's shirt tightened. Let go of him. Emily's voice cracked. Jake's breathing was ragged, his chest rising and falling rapidly. Ryan stood still, staring at him. Jake slowly released his grip, shoving Ryan back. His voice was cold. You win, Ryan. Emily looked like she was about to cry. Jake turned to her. I hope he's worth it. Then, without another word, he walked away. Emily took a step forward, as if she wanted to stop him. But she didn't, because she knew Jake was gone. Jake didn't know how long he had been walking. The streets blurred past him, but his mind was trapped in a loop. Emily, Ryan, the betrayal, everything he had held onto for 11 months, gone. His phone vibrated in his pocket. He pulled it out, expecting another useless message from Emily, but instead, it was from Matt. Matt, where are you? You good? Jake hesitated. Was he good? No. But sitting alone, drowning in his thoughts, wasn't going to help. Jake, meet me at Bruno's. Matt, on my way. Bruno's bar, 10:15 p.m. The bar was dimly lit, the low hum of conversations blending with the soft sound of classic rock playing from the speakers. Jake sat at a corner table, a half-empty beer bottle in front of him. He barely touched it. Matt walked in, spotting him instantly, and slid into the seat across from him. Man, you look like hell. Jake smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. I feel like it too. Matt leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. I heard what happened. Ryan's a snake. Always has been. Jake let out a breath, shaking his head. I should have seen it coming. Matt studied him for a second. Then, without a word, he pulled out his phone, tapped on the screen a few times, and turned it around to show Jake. Jake frowned. It was an Instagram profile. A picture of a girl. Soft brown eyes. A warm, shy smile. Sarah. Remember her? Matt asked. Jake stared at the screen, his mind slowly piecing things together. She was in a few of Emily's classes, right? Matt nodded. And she used to ask about you. A lot. Jake raised an eyebrow. Why? Matt chuckled, shaking his head. Because, idiot, she liked you. probably still does. Jake looked down at the phone again. Sarah. He had barely noticed her before. Had he been holding on to the wrong person this entire time, while someone else had been waiting for him? For the first time in days, a thought broke through the pain. Maybe this wasn't the end. Maybe it was a new beginning. Jake stared at Sarah's picture. It was strange. He had seen her before, maybe exchanged a few words in the past, but he had never really noticed her. Maybe because he was too busy holding on to someone who had already let go. Jake took a deep breath. Did it even matter now? Before he could overthink it, his fingers moved on their own. Jake. Hey, Sarah, can we talk? A few seconds passed. Then the screen lit up. Sarah. I was hoping you'd text. Jake felt his chest tighten, but this time it wasn't pain. It was something else, something lighter. The next day. College library. Jake walked through the quiet rows of bookshelves, scanning the tables for Sarah, and then he saw her. She was sitting by the window, a book open in front of her, a cup of coffee steaming beside it. She looked up just as he approached, and she smiled, not awkwardly, not nervously, but like she had been waiting for this moment. Jake pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. You're reading? He asked, glancing at the book in her hands. She tilted her head playfully. Yeah, it's a good one. Jake's eyes flicked to the cover, and his heart stopped. Love Beyond Time. That book. The same book where, almost a year ago, he had hidden a handwritten letter for Emily before leaving for Kuwait. The letter she never answered. Jake swallowed hard. Where'd you get that? Sarah blinked, looking down at the book. Oh, I found it in the campus library a while ago. But the weird thing is, when I opened it, I found something inside. She reached into the pages and pulled out a folded letter. Jake felt like the air had been knocked out of him. His letter. Sarah placed it on the table. It's yours, isn't it? Jake exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. Yeah? Sarah studied him for a second, then smiled softly. You know, sometimes things don't go the way we expect. Jake chuckled. Yeah, I figured that out the hard way. Sarah hesitated, then carefully slid the letter toward him. Maybe you wrote this for the wrong person. Jake looked up at her, something shifting inside him, and for the first time in months he thought, maybe she was right. Jake held the letter in his hands. It felt heavier than before, not because of the paper, but because of everything it represented. A past he had clung to, a love that had faded, and a future he had been too blind to see. He looked across the table at Sarah. She wasn't like Emily. She wasn't loud or the center of attention, but there was something about her, something steady, something real. She tilted her head. So, what happens now? Jake exhaled and placed the letter down. I think I start over. Sarah smiled, pushing her coffee toward him. Then let's start with this. Have some coffee with me. Jake chuckled, shaking his head. You're giving me your coffee? She shrugged. And I can get another one. Jake took the cup, but he wasn't looking at the coffee. He was looking at her. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel lost anymore. Maybe everything that happened, the heartbreak, the betrayal, the pain, had led him here to something new, to something better, maybe to the right person. And as the morning sun streamed through the window, Jake took a sip of coffee and smiled, because this time he wasn't looking back. He was finally moving forward, and it felt damn good.